Yo, what is up, everyone? This is the Twice Over Film Club, and I'm your host, Faraz. We're back this week to discuss Elizabethtown in depth, and despite the overall sentiments for this film, we thought there was a lot to like as well. Look, the tally can be as high as 74. That's not bad at all. Anyway, check out thetwiceover.com and see all the other movies we've watched and how we scored all of those. And then follow us at the Twice Over on all the socials to keep up with our watch schedule. Alright, it's myself, Yusuf, and Farhan for this one. So overall, this movie, it's about a character, Drew Baylor, who's played by Orlando Bloom. He pretty much screws up big time at work, gets fired, and that same night he gets news that his father has passed away in Kentucky. So it's on his way to Kentucky that he meets Claire, who's a stewardess, and she forcefully sparks up a conversation with him, and the story kind of goes from there. And obviously it's a romantic comedy. We mentioned that in the preview. But yeah, it looks like me and Yusuf are very much aligned here on the narrative. Farhan, what do you like about the narrative here?
I mean, 75 isn't it's average, right?
Yeah,
but
more or less.
there's honestly what's making me give this even a 75 score is the scenes that I remember very fondly from watching this when I was 12 years ago. And I think that they do a really good job of capturing your emotion or just tugging at your heartstrings at certain times, just like he does in all of his movies. And it's for those scenes that I give it a 75. Otherwise,
Mention the
like
scenes.
I said, it's a pretty trash narrative.
What are the scenes?
Just like let me think here. So the funeral scene where the mom, Holly Baylor, Susan Sarandon, it's not really narrative though. This is kind of a combination of writing and acting, I guess. But I really loved that scene.
Like the
I love the scene of
basically that she does.
yeah. And just her kind of performing sort of in front of her husband for his family that she never got to do when he was alive. I don't know. There was some thought, some very thoughtful stuff as far as that goes.
I would say I probably hacked this movie on narrative because like the broad structure actually is not bad. And I think it's fine. It was more so like the execution of the plot that I felt was kind of disjointed. I almost feel like, trying to, if I was trying to put the puzzle pieces of this movie together myself, I almost feel like there's a way to fit these things in nicely, transition between the different segments of this movie. They didn't do it well, but like I almost feel like the potential was there. Like maybe you could have gotten it. So like I said, I think it's structurally not horrible. I probably am faulting Cameron Crowe a little bit for the execution. So
No, I don't think so. I think it's fair. I mean, like I said, 75 is average. This is not a movie that I recommend for because of the narrative, but there are a couple of scenes. Like, honestly, if I could just compile those couple of scenes and just make people watch those, then you don't need to watch the whole movie.
Some scenes that I really enjoyed, just in terms of how Cameron Crowe is able to capture the emotion behind it, or when Claire and Drew are on the phone and like talking throughout the entire night.
Right.
Those couple times that happens, it was just done very well. I mean, you can kind of tell just how easy Claire is to talk to and how necessary it was for Drew to like basically open up.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly what I came away with as well, where it's just like, if you want to be in this movie just to root for Drew and Claire, I think the narrative's actually fine in that regard, right? Like it gives you that and it lends to that. If you're gonna go picking at more stuff, then there's probably little else for you to kind of be excited about. But like it really hits on that, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it hits on the rom-com aspect.
Yeah. So on the writing, what did you guys rate it for writing?
For writing, I gave it a 90.
What do you got, Yusuf?
I'm at a 55, guys.
Okay. A 55.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Okay, interesting. 85. Cameron Crowe writes movies really, really, really well. Dialogue especially. It's very quirky, very clever in my opinion.
This is witty. That's what I wrote down.
Witty. Right. 55 though. You're not a fan, huh?
You didn't find a lot of things funny? I thought the writing was really funny.
This is so quotable. This movie is very quotable.
So I felt like it was intending to be quotable. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yes.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of moments. First of all, there's like hardcore cliche stuff in here that I didn't like, but there was also like there's moments where they're trying to be extremely poetic or extremely like
Deep.
Inspiring.
Deep and inspiring.
Right.
And I felt like they put like, and this is coming from the narration, which obviously we count in the writing score, right? Not just dialogue. Some of the narration, it felt like they were doing that and they were like laying that out. And I was like, the scene that's playing behind that narration, I'm like, what does this have to do with that statement? And so I think that's where I was like, I even if I like the writing, I was like, I can't count this as a positive because it's just like, what is it talking about? It's almost like it came from a different moment. So I think that's where I scored down. But you're right. There is a lot of kind of inspiring. They have those moments, right? But I felt some of it was a little bit canned, a little bit disconnected.
So I 100% agree with you on that. But I fault that more on the execution in terms of the acting or the direction of the acting, because it's freaking Orlando Bloom. I can't stand the dude. My wife was cracking up because when I was writing this, she came in and she read my notes and she's literally read the line that says, "I can't stand Orlando Bloom. He belongs in theater." And right, like, is that not true? He's not a great actor, dude.
Theater doesn't mean that you're a bad actor. I mean,
no.
I think he's not a good
movie actor, man. Sorry?
I feel like he does better in dramatic roles.
Right, exactly. That's what I mean. So he needs to be. He's too dramatic. I'm not gonna even say for this movie. He's just too dramatic for me, dude.
Yeah.
So the areas where he was narrating something, it's like really inspiring, and it's like this, and he sounds like he's introducing the next iPhone, and he's talking about like committing suicide, and I'm like, dude, this doesn't fit.
Yeah,
it does not fit. But that's all in execution, because there are bits of dialogue that are executed so well. Alec Baldwin, in my opinion, is the best actor in this movie, and he's in the movie for like a minute, but what he says, and when he's talking to Drew about all the things that he has to give up because Drew screwed up so badly. But he's not like yelling at him. He's just telling him like, this is the stuff we could have done, but
I am ill-equipped in the philosophies of failure. Walk with me, Drew. My basketball team. They don't even know yet. My global environmental watchdog project will have to go. Sweet people. We could have saved the planet. But how do I make the concept of $972 million more real to you? It's the operating budget of a mid-sized country, a small civilization. It's big. It's so big, you could round it off to $1 billion. I cry a lot lately. The promise of a global future, pinned to a groundbreaking shoe, your design, with a new form of material launched this week to great fanfare, and now meeting a growing international roar of laughter and rejection. Enough to cause this memo from Jeffrey Barlow, CEO of DCS. This once highly anticipated product may actually cause an entire generation to return to bare feet. Wow. We are about to enter a free-fall plunge. And the sound you hear is the sound of shit hitting the fan.
And I love the part where he says, "It's so big, you can round it off to $1 billion." And then he just grabs his hand and he's like, I cry a lot lately. Like, that's brilliant, dude. That is such brilliant comedy writing.
Yeah, but do you think anyone other than Alec Baldwin could have done that? Like,
No.
he's so good at it. So I mean,
No.
I was like, well, the writing was probably okay, but the acting in that is just sublime,
yeah.
right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
I think, yeah, this is like we have to draw a line between writing and acting a lot of times, and it's like some of the narration, I feel like I got to put that on the writing because somebody's like sitting there saying like, hey, like Orlando, like say this line for us to record, and we're gonna put it up, like, you know,
it's like the most purposeful part of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
It's the parts, you're right. It's the parts that were forced.
right.
So that leads me to another piece of dialogue. Pieces like this actually kept it from giving me a higher score. When they're in the airport and they're walking, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Sarandon's like stops. She's like, "Oh my god, I gotta call people."
Yeah,
and then
I'm a widow.
I'm a widow, right? Like horrible acting, horribly executed scene, horrible piece of dialogue, written poorly, right?
Yeah.
And then also, one of my biggest problems with this movie was this idea, or like this saying that their dad always said that's supposed to be like really inspiring.
Dude, I was
and they all
literally going to bring that up because it's right after the moment you just mentioned in the airport,
yes,
right?
because they all huddle together. And she's like, now what was it that dad always said? If it wasn't this, it would be something else.
Yeah, and they're all supposed to like
What?
say it in unison, and they don't actually. They're like a little bit off when they try to all say it together.
Yeah, and that also doesn't. That's also just a piece of obvious, like, piece of information for the world. If it wasn't this, it would be something else.
So yeah, like
Okay,
my question there was like, what are you referring to? Are you saying that like
Right.
if this didn't kill me, something else would? And I was like, that's fine, but how does that make you feel better about the fact that you're dealing with a loss? It doesn't.
And
Yeah.
Like, I was like, okay.
why would that be his motto throughout his life while he's alive?
Right. How is that a positive idiom? Like, if it wasn't this, it would be something else. Okay. I think they just ran out of things to say. Then there's pieces like, Jesse, the cousin, who executed some of his dialogue pieces so well.
Yeah, I liked him.
When he says, like, this loss will be met by a hurricane of love. Like, I loved that.
He was good. Like I was almost like thinking he was like Will Ferrell-esque in that role. Will Ferrell.
You know
Like-
who? So you know who he is? Have you guys seen Parks and Rec?
Yes.
Here and there.
You remember the dude who was he was like the head of the department before Amy Poehler? Like, he was there and then he was going out with Anne.
Okay.
That's this guy, and I had no idea. I've watched this movie 30 times, and I had no idea that it was the same dude.
I didn't recognize him from anywhere. So, but like he was good. Like he was a standalone actor, like in a
Yeah.
lot of ways, where he was able to be the comic relief without really anyone to play off of, because nobody was doing that with him other than like his son. What's the son's name? Samson. That guy was great too. But yeah, like I mean, he was able to carry some of that load on his own. I thought he was really good actually, and he's not going to get credit for it because it's just like this comedic role on the side or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it was very well executed, that part.
He well acted, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, a good combination of writing and acting with him actually is when he's showing the poster of he's going to perform or open for
Leonard Skinner.
I forget what
Ruckus.
the band was.
Leonard Skinner.
Yeah, Leonard Skinner. And then he keeps going. He's like, oh yeah, so we're under them. We're right there. Oh, and then we never actually
So he
perform.
goes,
We never
we
for
open
them."
for Leonard Skinner. And he's like, goes to the poster. He's like, look at that. Keep going. And he's like looking down. He's looking down. Camera pans down slowly on the poster. He's like, keep going.
That poster was
There's
great.
small text, also ruckus.
Yeah.
And he's like,
poster-
well, we almost opened for them. It was so funny, dude.
Yeah, the poster itself, like it was hard to see it all like very quickly, but like it's like literally like, okay, like here's the main, the headliner, here's the opening act for them, here's who's performing on the side stage, here's who else is in the building, and then like all the way at the bottom
Yeah.
is Ruckus.
It literally says also ruckus.
It just says also.
And then he starts singing, and there's like, in the middle of him singing, there's some kid screaming in the background.
Yeah, I thought there was some good comedy there in the writing for sure. And then Jesse was one of those actors that executed it well.
Right.
Speaking of acting, let's talk about our acting score. I give it a 65.
Yeah, I went with a 75.
75 for me. And on that note, I wanted to mention like what I wanted to ask actually, like, so we put our baseline for like an average score around a 70, right? But like when you give something a 70 or a 75, what exactly does that mean to you? Does that mean that's like solid, or does that mean that's like nothing worth mentioning?
Good question. So, for me, a 75 score, which is average to me, that would mean one of two things. That would mean either overall everybody was just average. They weren't bad. They were just average. Or, which is more often the case for the movies that we do, there's some bits of really good acting, and then there's some bits that are just terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason I'm rating it highly are because of the bits of great acting in it. Because otherwise, if that Jesse dude was not in the movie, Alec Baldwin was not in the movie, certain scenes with Kirsten Dunst were not in here, this would be like a 40. You know? So that's what that means for me. What about you guys?
Faraz, how do you feel about that?
For me, it's not so much on, main actors versus supporting actors. It's how many times in the movie I get taken out of the movie because of bad acting. So in this movie, there was a couple times that I did. Specifically, Orlando Bloom. Like one scene that comes to mind right now is, after the night he spends with Claire in the hotel, like he runs out the next morning and he's like, and he basically confesses to her, like, hey, everyone's going to find out that I'm a total failure on Monday. And he's like, I lost the company $1 billion. Not a million. Like, the way he's just saying it, it's just, I was like, all right, man, this is stupid. It's cringy, it's bad acting. So it's moments like that. The frequency of that is how I determine, like, how I rate the acting. So if it happens more than a few times, it's going to be definitely below average. If it happens once or twice, about average. If it doesn't happen at all, then it was clearly above average.
I think I agree on how I assess what I'm going to score it, right? And Orlando Bloom, I think he failed at several parts in this movie. And as the main character, he's the star. That is worth a lot of points taken off. However, I end up at a 75, and I almost walk out of this saying, like, yeah, there's some really bad moments, but there's some other, like, really nice moments, and like, yeah, like, 75, like, it's almost like a positive thing to me in a way, because, I understand that's like a C, right? But, like, at the end of the day, the standard is very high for what makes it out of Hollywood. You can argue with me on that statement and say that Hollywood's a factory and a lot of stuff gets made that shouldn't get made. But in the end, I feel like something that gets made, it has to have merit, and a 75 is not horrible. And if I see a 7 out of 10 rating on any ratings website for movies, I'm gonna be like, hey, that's pretty good. You know what I mean? So from that standpoint, I think I'm at a 75, but I was fairly positive about the acting in the end, with a lot of holes, and I that's why I scored it down.
So I think that's a great, I mean, if you were to take the best acting moments in this movie, right, and if it was consistent throughout the movie, it would be rated pretty highly, correct?
Yeah.
If you took the worst acted parts in this movie, even from the main actors, by the way, who is the worst actor in this movie? And that was what the whole movie was consistently, then this would be horrible. So there's a medium between the two. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. And so, I mean, but that's just worth considering, I guess, because, you can probably see that a lot of our scores, even the movies that we end up liking, the average score is somewhere in the 70s in the end. And I think that's okay. That doesn't mean a horrible thing. But it takes a lot to really get up into, that higher echelon of a high 80s or a 90s, like that. It's very difficult to do that. Even if you like a movie, it's probably not going to end up there. So worth noting. But getting back into the acting, Kirsten Dunst, I thought, was better. I didn't like that Southern accent very much, and it seemed to phase in and out at different parts. But that aside, I think she was the better actor of the pair. I also felt like maybe they didn't have the best chemistry, or not natural chemistry, I would say. So I think you can see when that happens that the director has to be a little bit more overbearing to kind of execute his vision. But once that's too transparent, then it kind of ruins the moment. So that's how I felt. I felt like they were trying to make up for the lack of natural chemistry there, maybe. But I like we discussed, I probably put that more on Orlando Bloom than I do on Kirsten Dunst.
Yeah, I think she did. Honestly, so her character is very similar to Kate Hudson's character in Almost Famous. Would you agree with that, Faraz? I mean, very like down to earth, charming, not shy. She's very real, outspoken. She's not trying to be something she's not. She's authentic. And so that's kind of the character that he loves to put in for his female roles, for his main female roles. If you look at Jerry Maguire, if you remember Renee Zellweger in that movie, she was the same kind of thing. Somebody who's like, he always tries to go for the underdog, the substitute people, if you will.
Hey, that's
and that's what he makes his characters. So she does a really good job at being somebody who is a substitute person, but has the energy of somebody that is, well, not. And I think I talked about it in Almost Famous, but and maybe it's just me, but he kind of makes you fall for these characters at times, because you kind of, you can think of people in your life who you crushed on that were exactly like that, or some aspect of that, if that's what you were into.
Or you assumed or presumed that they were like that.
Right, you assume. Right, it's the idea of that is what you kind of like fell for, and that's what Kirsten Dunst kind of plays in this movie. Her acting at times falters, but I thought she did a really good job overall.
Yeah, but I will say, I do agree, Yusuf, that accent is, I don't even know if it's really a Southern accent or like an Appalachian accent or something, but it's like a little off. Like,
I think that's just Kentucky, dude.
Didn't roll off the tongue. Maybe, yeah. That's what I'm saying.
I think she was unable to
Appalachian
maintain
accent.
it also. And again, that points to like the director being like, hey, do the accent. And like, she's like trying, and then it just keeps like, fading out.
It slips. Yeah.
Who else is in this movie? We talked about, I think Susan Sarandon overall was a positive. There's moments, like you said, especially in the airport, that we didn't like, but that scene at the memorial, as much as I thought what they wrote in terms of what's going to happen in that scene, I thought she was great on stage, and like you really just end up enjoying that moment, right?
Right. So
like that's just that's her. That's her, kind of natural charisma that's just carrying you, I think.
I think that's the only time that she was good in this movie, and not because she's not a good actor, because she was not written, her character was not written for well, in my opinion. I just don't, like, they made her too hectic at every other point in the movie, forced hectic, I should say.
Yeah.
Like, didn't seem like somebody who was anxious. It looked like somebody who was, like Faraz said, we were taken out of the movie and we saw the process of somebody acting in a play, acting as somebody who is like anxious, but in the end we could see the process.
Not actually anxious.
We couldn't see the process. I couldn't see the process in the funeral scene. Like, that was such a great scene. When she did cry, it was very natural and very real and heartfelt in that scene, though. Outside of that scene, she didn't have a shining moment for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd agree. At the top of my notes page, I literally wrote, I think the acting was not credible in a lot of scenes.
Right.
And that carries through not just for her, but for a lot of people. I will put a big disclaimer on that and say that grieving a loss is a very complex and difficult to understand process. Nobody
100%.
does it the same. And so I think us looking at a portrayal of it and saying like, it's not believable, this is not what a person would do in that situation, that's a little bit, that's missing the point. And I think part of the point of this movie is the fact that everyone grieves in different ways. So kind of imprinting our own particular type of grieving on the characters, hard to do. But, nonetheless, just looking at it, I was like, this doesn't feel real. So in the end, regardless of how I feel about that, if you're taken out, you're taken out. There's nothing you can do about that, right?
Yeah.
So Judy Grier, by the way, limited in this movie, but I thought great as per usual. She just does Judy Grier. She's a little bit comical. She ends up being super annoying, but like I just love her annoying. It's like it's annoying in the moment, but like later you're just like cracking up about it.
There were times that she was also kind of like cringy, but she cracks me up in almost everything that she is.
Isn't she cringy like by design to a degree though?
That's sort of her deal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what I thought.
Yeah.
Paula Dean's in this movie, by the way, too.
Oh, that's Paula Dean?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
My mom was watching this with me, and she was like, "That's the Southern lady from the cooking channel. That's and I was like, no, it looks like her, but it's not her." And she's like, "No, that's Paula Dean." And I was like, "No, it's not. It just looks like her." And she was like, "No, that's Paula Dean." And then finally I looked it up. I forgot she existed, kind of. She
was pretty good.
Yeah, she was fine. I didn't notice that it was her. So usually when there's a celebrity that doesn't know how to act, it's like a sore thumb sticking out. But wasn't that, because I kept trying to convince myself.
I mean, she was doing exactly what she does in real life.
Yeah.
She became problematic at some point, didn't she? I kind of forgot.
Yeah, she did. She then got caught with the N-word
Well,
or something.
dude, no, she had a plantation wedding. She had a plantation themed not wedding, some kind of thing. She had some kind of maybe it was for her kid or something. There was a plantation themed event.
What does that mean? Like she had like house slaves?
I don't know. But
dressed
that's
up
what
in
that's the
costumes?
headline that I remember.
Because that would be crazy. That would be
She had
way
a
worse
dress-up
than what I
party
thought it was.
where everyone dressed up as plantation workers, and sounds like the whole thing.
Oh my god. I don't even want to look it up.
All right, well, let's go into themes. I gave it an 80.
I also gave it an 80.
70 for me. I think
Okay,
there's
so pretty good.
yeah there's stuff in here. I mean, especially I think you can pull a lot of depth out of this if you're looking for it. And that's good. It's there if you're kind of interested in it. It's not slapping you in the face if you don't want it.
Yeah, it's definitely there, and it's very subtle, and it's also very well executed. I think Cameron Crowe did a great job of getting the entire feel of, mourning like a loss. Like you said, Yusuf, like everyone does it differently, and this movie kind of shows that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like how the wife is filled with anxiety and is trying to substitute her feelings with some activity and like doing other things. How his hometown in Kentucky of Elizabethtown, like how everyone there, how they're memorializing him versus how Drew wants to do it, which is, kind of detached and just wants to take him back to Oregon. I just thought it was very well done. And again, I know we talk about coming of age as if it's something only for young people, or young being like adolescents or teenagers or something. But you could kind of argue that this is kind of a coming of age thing for Drew, for Orlando Bloom's character, right? Because he has a major life event, two, in fact, one, him getting fired, and then the death of his father, and then like Claire is the catalyst to have him get through it and grow from it, and then how the entire community in Elizabethtown helps him process everything.
I even outside of the grieving, mourning, death kind of aspect, I love the like rooting for the underdog aspect in this movie, where like he's coming from like this big city to this little tiny town, and then just like falls in love with the people there and all that stuff. I don't know what it's like in Kentucky, but it seemed very charming and very appealing. And so
that Southern hospitality.
Yeah. So I think just the way that they portray that, I know that's not really a theme per se, but I just really enjoyed how they, how they portrayed that, like sometimes the best things or sometimes the beautiful things don't come in the, prettiest, fanciest, sparkliest packages.
Let me try to turn that into a theme, actually, because I think you're.
Well, that is it. I just said it.
But you started out saying that like maybe this isn't really a theme. I think it totally is, man. I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think it fits in this category because there's something here. I'll be honest. I thought they tried to force this theme of like they start out with a couple of really like specific narrations where he's like but it was like something, a fiasco makes people feel alive at the thought that it's happening to somebody else and not them, and like the difference between success and greatness, nobody cares about nobody cares about greatness, they only care about success, right? And actually it is a bit forced, but that the whole idea that he goes back there and he's a fraud the entire time he's there because the article has not come out about his failure, so everyone still thinks he's this big shot, and he just gets to connect with these people the fact that you don't need the big job and the big paycheck in order to be great and have a great life, right? I think those scenes did capture that. And is that fair to put with I'm kind of
Yeah,
I'm kind of speaking
absolutely.
for what I think you were trying to say. I mean, so if you disagree, let me know. But I really thought that was well captured, and that small town charm. I think that's what it is to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks.
Yeah, it doesn't matter where you come from or what you do. Like, like while you're there, you're part of the family.
Yeah. And I think the another thing that I really liked in terms of thematic elements, the way that they kind of do this portrayal of the way that other people's guilt and sympathy and condolences ends up overwhelming or even burdening the people who actually need to grieve. Drew is ready to commit suicide before his sister calls him and says, like, look, our father passed away. You need to go deal with this. This is your responsibility, right? So suddenly he's like, okay, I have to deal with this thing. No time to process that, his father just died. I need to go deal with this thing because, I'm the oldest and no one else is going to deal with it. He gets there, and did you guys notice how he kept having to give everyone their chance to talk to him about his father? It's almost like he's doing them the favor of like letting them get it off their chest, and they even go to the point where he's telling other people my condolences.
Condolences. That
right?
was hilarious.
And that was one moment where I loved it, and it was kind of subtle, but what's the cousin's name?
Jesse.
Yeah, Jesse kind of pulls him aside. He's like, that was kind of weird. And then I know you think you're doing the right thing, but you should let people give you the condolences.
It's an incoming phrase. Yeah.
So I thought they were doing a good job of portraying that. And the time it really hit home was when he goes back to the hotel, and there's that wedding going on at the hotel, right? And he's kind of just stuck in that environment. And Chuck, the groom who he just met, as soon as he mentions his father died, he's stuck standing in front of Chuck and letting Chuck cry on his shoulder. And Chuck is crying about Drew's dad that he never met. And Drew ends up having to comfort him. And he's just like, this is another thing I have to deal with. I have to let everyone get their feelings out to me because it was my dad that died. So I thought that was just really interesting. Later, I think Judy Grier even asks him, like, have you cried yet? And he's like, it's almost like as if it hasn't occurred to him to cry. So I thought that was really interesting. And it's very true in a lot of ways where, everyone kind of gets caught up on doing their part as part of this whole grieving process. And it can be very tough on the people who are most affected.
Yeah, he doesn't, I guess, really let it process until he's in the car ride back home.
Claire,
right?
Claire lets him do that. Yeah, she facilitates
Yeah, exactly.
That.
All right, so we can go on to our aesthetic scores. Here I give it a 60.
I went with an 80.
60 for me.
I'm probably overrating this. But the reason I rate it so highly is not because of the visuals. It's because of the music. So Cameron Crowe is, he's so good, in my opinion, of creating mood with music, especially like a feel good mood. That's why like so much of the work that is done in the scenes that we're talking about, it's done by the music. The funeral scene, for example, with Susan Sarandon, music is half of the sentiment in that scene.
Yeah, feel good, nostalgia, like kind of gives you that vibe. And we all like talked about it in Almost Famous as well, and how good it was in doing that.
Yeah.
I thought the music honestly was really heavy. And I think it was the music's not bad. I actually quite liked a lot of the music. And it sounds like you agree, Farhan. I thought it was used so heavily. It's quite loud as well. I mean, just in terms of leveling, it's extremely loud on the scenes that it plays over, to the point that it becomes something of the focus. And I think that's kind of what bothered me. Of course, it's conveying emotion on its own, but you don't want to go too heavy with that, in my opinion. So I kind of scored it down probably for that.
And I can see that. Here's the thing about Cameron Crowe is that he is a huge music like buff, especially like 80s, 70s, 80s like rock kind of stuff. That's why huge references, Lynyrd Skynyrd and stuff like that. And you hear their music throughout his movies. Almost Famous is about that whole thing. Almost Famous is supposed to be like an autobiography. So that's why he uses music a lot. And honestly, I feel like for him, when he makes a movie, it's partly to show a story, and then it's partly just to be like, hey, listen to this good music alongside of it. Here's a track. Here's a music track. So music is huge. Like, think about the road trip, right?
Music, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The idea of the road trip that he takes, where there's specific songs to listen to for specific times, you know? It's a huge thing just for him in general. So I can understand it's not for everybody, and I can understand you being like, it's really in your face. And I could arguably it is, but I think that's for him. That's like, yeah, well, yeah, that's the point. You should know what you're getting into when you're watching my movie.
He's almost
that's why it's not for everybody.
He's trying to have like an emblematic soundtrack, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Have you guys seen Garden State?
Yes.
This comes to mind because we're talking about 2005. The Garden State came out in 2004, and I'm not saying, but I'm kind of saying that soundtrack of Garden State is like, you know, it's like famous almost, right? Because when that movie came out, like every song in that movie became a popular song. That soundtrack was like, you know, it was so iconic. And you know, I don't think he's trying to do the same thing, but like the amount of music that is used in this movie and how heavy it is reminded me of that. I don't think it was as effective as it was in Garden State, but like I said, I kind of liked all his choices of music nonetheless. So
I can see how you would come up with that, the similarities to Garden State.
Trying to find yourself on this like, you know, weird trip to this faraway town. I mean, there are
yeah. No, definitely. And Garden State is a way better acted movie.
Yeah,
from what I remember than this is. But most of the songs that are in this are not from this movie. They're not made for this movie or anything like that.
They're not
I mean, they're all old songs.
Yes.
Some of them are maybe new. So, but I don't like. I don't believe that he was trying to make like
another
like soundtrack for his movie.
Right.
Like, hey guys, check out this. We're gonna make a lot of money from the CD that sells with this movie. No, I don't think he was trying to do that. I think he's just trying to showcase songs that he loves. There's a couple of scenes. This is gonna be incredibly corny, but one of my scenes I think that I like, one of my favorite scenes of anything I think ever, of where music comes in, the transition of music coming in is when they're on the phone and they're talking. You know, they go back and forth talking about different topics. It's obviously through time, like you're skipping through time. But when she's like, I think I've been asleep most of my life, and he says, me too, and then the Ryan Adams songs comes on, the Come Pick Me Up song. But I loved when that song came in at the moment that it did. It was just a perfect inclusion of that song.
Those were one of my most favorite scenes as well. The phone conversations. And then for comedy, I think that one where Drew's like on the phone with like 4 different people, telling each one to be like to hold on while he talks to the other. That was pretty funny. Back to the aesthetics though, visually, I thought this movie like just felt so dated. And it's funny because for Almost Famous, we talked about how like timeless it felt, but like Almost Famous is taking place, you know, in a specific period in the 70s, and the film is from like 1999.
And it was 5 years prior to this movie.
Yeah, and this movie is a contemporary, so it just feels more dated because I don't know, like. So I think that from the sets to the technology to even just like the vibe that I was getting, and this could be kind of the inconsistency we're talking about. Farhan, you mentioned the music he's using is from, you know, a prior time period, but it's taking place in the 2000s. I don't know, it just. So like visually it was like not a good movie. So
there's one scene that I liked visually. Here's the thing. The beginning of this movie was very different than the rest of it. When he went to Elizabethtown, things took a drastic turn in terms of the visual vibe, I guess the visual philosophy of the movie, because in the beginning there were some artistic kind of things that they were looking for. You know, the first scene, the truck is just backing out, and it's very symmetrical. Everything's very symmetrical. It's kind of, there's things that are kind of like Wes Anderson-ish.
I felt that in the like that opening sequence again when he's trying to go up to Phil's office, and like he's telling us about his boss Phil, and he's like he's obsessed with the number 2, and then you look and there's like 2 secretaries lined up right next to each other, all of that. Definitely.
The doors, the paintings, and like stuff like that. It was very symmetrical. And I don't know, I don't know the reason why, but that was completely abandoned once they got to the plane. And there was no longer any really thought towards, let's see how good this is going to look, you know? Oh, it might be interesting if we shot this thing that way. Not that I noticed, at least.
Yeah, I didn't notice anything. You're right. Once it got to Kentucky, it just felt dated at that point. But I guess that's kind of the point, maybe, to make it seem like
so different. Yeah.
Things have slowed down. They're a little more old school here. They're laid back. Yeah. I don't know.
However, I do love the scene of when they were. I think this is, after the Jesse's dad
Simpson
said you can't be friends with your son, and then there's a scene of them walking at night in the hot Kentucky heat. Jesse and Drew, and he's just got his kid in his arms. That's like a very picturesque moment for me.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Was that supposed to read on Drew and his father as well? Because you get the vibe in this movie that he just didn't really know his father. And I think the point is that that's a myth, right? That's something that we tell ourselves. But you can know anyone, right? So.
Right.
But I thought that was a nice parallel because he's dealing with that the entire movie, where like everyone's telling him about his father and how great he was, and he has a few childhood memories, and that's it.
Yeah, I wish. I wish that they did away with some stuff in favor of including more of an attachment with this guy and his father, because how is him taking this road trip, all of a sudden he's crying and he's talking to his dad in his ashes, but he's never had a relationship with the guy, so how is he even having an emotional connection with the dude?
Yeah.
Or maybe that's the point. I don't know.
I felt like maybe they're trying to make a point there. And I think it's a fairly good point because, you can have no relationship with a parent and then that parent passes and it's still, it hits you like a thunderbolt, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And so I think at some level they're trying to tell us that you can have a relationship with someone beyond their death, because he gets that out of connecting with the people that loved his father, even though he didn't know anything about his father. Even I think his sister tells him at some point, like, yeah, Dad was a lot of fun those few years after you got super busy, right? And he just feels like, well, he missed the real period where he could have gotten to know his father. But he gets some of that back by going to Elizabethtown. And so I think maybe that's the point they're making, and I think it's a decent point.
It is. And Farn, I think there was some relationship, because he always mentions how he was going to take this road trip to Kentucky with his dad, but then he kept delaying it because of his job. And he kind of has that regret, obviously, once his dad passes. Like, oh, we should have been here like a year ago. Yeah.
No, that's true. So, I do wish I wish they put a little bit. I just wish they put more. I'm always wanting more of that relationship. But also, so that, and I wish also, there's a bunch of things that I wish. This movie has the potential to be great, right?
Yeah, like I said,
so many things that are let down.
I think maybe it's just like the execution. We said in a lot of different ways that this movie feels a little bit disjointed. We've said that in a lot of different ways, and I think that's kind of the flaw here. And when that happens, it's kind of a very glaring flaw, I think. But like I said, the bones are pretty good.
What's the other thing, Farn? Is it going to be Claire and her
backstory? Not necessarily even her backstory, but
does Ben exist? What is the answer to this mystery?
No, that's like that's going to be the sequel to Tenet.
It turns out that
honestly,
Ben
it all comes
is
back
actually Drew's father.
No, there was a protagonist, man.
That's funny.
Ben was the protagonist.
Yeah, no, I wish that there was more building up of that relationship, because not even that. I wish that there was more redeeming qualities in Drew that she saw, because literally he's just a bag. He's just a bag of just emotions and anxiety. He's not he just looks attractive. That's the only redeeming characteristic that this guy has. And I refuse to believe that she fell for him just because of that.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
That suicide attempt that we get to watch, I hated that scene. And it's mostly it's mostly the character, I think, but he's pumping his fists in the air because he was able to attach a knife to his exercise bike or whatever, so he can basically stab himself to death without having to do the work. And he's marveling at his creation, and then he dumps all his possessions in the dumpster before he commits suicide, so that when he changes his mind, he's like, oh shit, I don't have any stuff anymore. What am I gonna do? What?
Well, he doesn't change his mind, right? Because even when he's in Elizabethtown, he like says something like to Claire that
No, he didn't. Yeah, he
when I
didn't change
get
it.
back, I have a very dark date with destiny or something
right.
like that.
More so, he's delayed,
Implying that
he's
he's
delayed the
still-
decision. He hasn't
he's-
changed his long-term trajectory, I guess.
Yeah. One thing I think, Farhan, where you're talking about Claire not having enough, or Drew not having enough characteristic qualities about him that should make Claire fall for him. I think that conversation that she has about the substitute people, I think that really wraps it up very nicely of why she would have feelings for him.
Maybe.
Because he also has like no attachments really to anyone, right? I mean, he has this girlfriend, Ellen. We didn't even mention Jessica Biel is in the movie.
Yeah, that's for good reason.
And
I mean, to be fair, she's in it like 2 scenes,
like
but
you know, he,
Yeah.
yeah, I know, but like, and like he doesn't really have the relationship with his father, like we mentioned. But I just thought like that scene is what kind of made it seem appropriate that Claire,
because she
would
does
fall.
a
guess
lot,
so.
right? She does so much for him without really knowing him or without really getting any idea of who she is. Like the fact that she like wrote up this like uber long scrapbook of like road trip instructions for him, just on a whim or whatever. Like, I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, that's a little bit much. You're doing the most over there.
Right.
But
This girl is thirsty. You know what I mean?
yeah, that's what I was trying not to say. I mean,
Yeah.
she is, but I mean, and right, like the whole thing about her being the substitute person, that makes the point of why she does that and why she likes that she just kind of sees that as her role, right? To jump in and do what the person who isn't there to do what they should do, she can take care of that or whatever, right? And that's kind of how she feels internally. But I did think, I mean, yeah, like I would have liked more explanation beyond that, I guess, because that whole like curated road trip concept, I actually like, I loved that as a concept.
Oh, yeah.
Like I think that would have been great as a structure to an entire movie. That could be the structure of an
Right.
entire movie basically, but they squeezed it into like 10 minutes. So I felt kind of cheated there. And then it kind of cheapens the whole thing, I felt. So like, again, that's execution. That's kind of that's obviously that comes down more to the vision. But yeah, there's like pieces here that I'm like, yeah, you could have done something really nice with this.
Yeah, and I wish that Orlando Bloom was just not in the movie. That character needs to be darker. I mean, it just needs to. It needs to. He can't be somebody who's like a dramatic actor and is narrating these things like he's trying to be inspiring. You know, it's just if it was a darker, like less, like a little bit more, maybe even laid back character, then.
Like
It would have been a
detached.
little bit more detached, maybe. Like and then he turns into, then he falls for Kirsten Dunst, and then she changes him. Like that would be a different story. Like this would be a great movie, but he himself doesn't really change from the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie.
He doesn't. I mean, I guess he.
Yeah,
We know that he
develop
doesn't commit
him
suicide.
change,
That's the
but-
only thing that changes.
He develops a relationship with a lot of people too, I guess, right? But like,
Yeah.
there's not enough of a backdrop to show that he was like a really non-personable person before that. Like we don't get to see that. And then they kind of like they end on again these kind of dramatic quotes of like, there's a narration of him at the end where he's like, no true fiasco ever began as a quest for mere adequacy. And I was like, are you saying that you like really like made a big strive for greatness in this movie and you risked it all and it paid off? Because I don't like that's not the plot necessarily.
So on that, you brought a perfect. I was gonna wonder how to bring this in. There's another version to this movie.
Oh, no way. I saw 2 versions on Amazon Prime and I wasn't sure if it was like just like one was the HD or something. Tell me more.
So there's I haven't watched it, but I know what happens, and I haven't watched it because I don't want to. The first version of this movie that came out was an extra, I don't know, I think it was like 13, 14 minutes or something like that. And his shoe actually ends up being a success.
Dear Lord.
Yeah.
I don't want it. I don't want
Yeah.
any part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know where you would find the other version because like I said, I've never seen it, but I just know about it. And if you look it up, you'll be able to find it. But if you didn't like the movie now, we would all hate it after we watched that. If we watched that, because that's where I feel like they're pulling in a lot of that narration from, where they're talking about the thing that grows in concrete and all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
I thought they were talking about the love blooming, or he's choosing life over dying. But actually, that's probably in relation. That's probably in. They're probably talking about the success that he ends up having with the shoe.
That makes
in
so
the other
much,
version.
That makes so much of the narration make so much more sense.
Yeah.
And I hate it nonetheless because like the whole point was his failure. If in the end it's like actually the shoe does great, then it's like, I mean, it doesn't justify
It's
all
just
the development.
a Full House. It's just a Full House episode.
Right. Yeah, like some hotshot walks in and he's like, oh, it's a great shoe. Let me order 9 million of them, and then they make all their money back, and he gets his job back, and then Ellen sees him with Claire and gets super jealous. We could do it all, but I don't know where we're going with any of that. So
Yeah, exactly.
It's but you're so right that like just all of that plus the fact that Orlando Bloom doesn't really show us much emotion. I mean, he also doesn't show us that he's like this person who's like obsessed with his career and gave it all up for his career. We don't get that either. We just don't get anything to start with as a baseline.
Right.
So it was just weird. I mean,
who would be better? Who would be great?
Better? Someone
who would be
dark?
great for his role? Not necessarily even dark,
Hey,
but
you
just
know
somebody
who would
who's
be
like
great,
less like understated.
Yusuf, Farhan hates Riz Ahmed. That's
Oh,
you said
no.
Oh, you're suggesting Riz Ahmed. Wow.
No.
Dude, he's detached as hell, man.
That would be something. And there would be a lot of racial tones in that movie, that version of it as well. That version might be out there.
By the way, there was one black guy in the whole movie. One.
Well, I mean, when you have Paula Dean,
Wait,
you have to
where?
be careful how many. Yeah,
I know.
That's messed up.
One dude. He was in the funeral. He didn't even have any lines. They just put him in there as a token guy. They're like, we don't want to get any flack for this.
Kentucky, man. It is Elizabethtown, Kentucky specifically.
Yeah,
Come
fair.
on.
Yeah. Anything more about this movie, guys? So yeah, basically, this is feel good, sometimes at its best, and sometimes at its worst. This is a typical feel good movie, is what I'll say.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I will summarize this with my favorite scene and my least favorite scene. My least favorite is him driving to Elizabethtown for the first time, and he misses exit 60B.
Oh my god, dude.
And he's sitting in the car, and he's like, did I miss 60B? Did I miss 60B? And he's like punching the air and everything. I mean, assuming we're seeing the vision of the camera person, right? I can feel the director over my shoulder, and like he's telling Orlando Bloom, like, no, like, punch the air, punch the ceiling.
Yeah.
Like I can, that was bad. And I mean, it's because Orlando Bloom doesn't know how to do that to begin with and had to be told too much. My favorite scene though is him at the end of that driving into Elizabethtown, and you kind of get this like slow montage, and everyone's waving and everyone's pointing him on because everyone knows who he is, and you get a sense of that community, right? And you get to see all the. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of signals in that scene as well of who loved Mitch Baylor and how much they loved him. I think that was, and the music in that scene, I think that little intro into Elizabethtown was like really beautiful, and it gives you kind of the feel good that you want. So there's high moments and there's low moments. That's what I'll say.
For sure. And like I think what Yusuf said early on is quite apt, is that if you're rooting for Claire and Drew, it makes it a pretty good watch. And the writing I thought is pretty solid, pretty funny.
Cool. Well, you guys gave this a lot more positive things to say than I thought you were going to. So
I mean, listen, I can hate a movie and I can find some nice nuggets. There's always something enjoyable in these movies. There's something you can think about or pick your brain with. I totally disagree that like, everything has to be horrible just because I didn't like it overall, So
right.
You can find things to enjoy in this movie. Probably the majority, it's up for debate, right? But there's good moments.
Yeah, Farhan, and we're not 14 anymore.
That's true.
I don't know why you thought 14-year-olds would love this movie.
Yeah, dude, I was for some reason I was way older than my body at times, and then I was like way younger than my body at times. Anyways.
All right, we'll leave it at that, guys. Thank you.
That's what we're leaving it out at? No, you're going to cut away before that.
Thanks for listening to this production of The Twice Over. If you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing and sharing it with a friend. Want to see what your tally is? Check out thetwiceover.com. All the movies we've done are listed there, as well as what we're watching for the current week. Follow us at The Twice Over on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, where you can leave us any suggestions, feedback, or comments. And if you're about it, you can also support us on Patreon. The music you hear on this podcast is from Amerigo Gazaway. You can find his work on Bandcamp and Spotify.